All right, so just this one issue that's been in the news for some months now, and that's the re-election of the president of the African Development Bank. And of course, with all of the issues around it, people will wonder, hey, what's going to happen? Well, it has happened. The Sakumi Additional has been sworn in for a second term. I would like to get some perspectives on what was all that about, and then what should we expect within the next 5 years, especially as it concerns us as a nation, Nigeria? We have Professor Banji Oyeyinka, who is a special advisor to the president of the AfDB on industrialization. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So, well, maybe we should, I don't know if it's a good way to begin with. What was all that furore about, you know, the investigations and all of that, and which led to this whole, second term of the AfDB president?
Thank you, Chris. I'm happy to join you. I think we have all that behind us now.
Yes, we do.
This has been a very interesting period to say the least. But I'm glad, and all of us in Africa are very happy now that this is behind us. I want to thank the government of Nigeria. Yesterday, you saw at the inauguration of the president for second term, he was very effusive in thanking the president of Nigeria, all the heads of state, all the regional commissions, and all Nigerians, actually. For once, we stood up as one to defend what we believe is the right thing to do. We stood up behind a good man to claim our faith in him. So I believe that this is something worth emulating, actually. If we all stand up in unity, we can achieve quite a lot. So for me, it is a big lesson for Africa, for Nigeria, for all of us in the process of pushing Africa's development.
Well, with that kind of commendation definitely comes tremendous responsibility on the person of the president of the AfDB who has just been re-elected for a second term. What's going to be new?
Well, he spelled out clearly yesterday in his speech that the original vision that was given to him will continue. That is the high five. As you all heard yesterday, the high five is going to continue. And I'm sure for those who are not aware, is the 5 bold missions: light up Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, and also to improve the quality of life of Africans. So, and of course, we also have the idea of integrating Africa. This is the most important assignment for all of Africa. We are so far apart, even though we are all on the same continent. Trade between Africans is just about 16%. When you look at Asia and the European Union, is around 60%. Tariffs between Africans are higher than you find tariffs between Africa and the rest of the world. So integrating Africa will be a very important assignment, again, given in light of the African Free Trade area that have just been inaugurated. So those 5 areas, the high fives will continue. Bolder, with speed, with scale. He was very clear also that we are going to be more selective in the things we do. And he emphasized yesterday, especially 3 things: quality infrastructure, economic infrastructure, quality health infrastructure, and also knowledge infrastructure, including partnership, financial infrastructure to ensure that Africans also trade among themselves in harmony. So basically, the emphasis for him yesterday was to improve also responsiveness of the bank, to decentralize decision making, to make our processes more effective, especially given the COVID-19 and all of us were now restricted to working virtually for the most part. So financial sustainability of the bank is going to be a very important issue for us. As you know, we face a situation where even the most industrialized countries have been, some of them, almost 7 of them have been downgraded. Some of them are part of they are part of our shareholders. So when your big shareholders are downgraded in terms of the AAA rating, it affects the bank's rating also. So he promised also to work on that so that we have our own internal rating, like some of the other MDBs. So the key message is building the future, building it strongly, building Africa, building a resilient Africa, and doing it together so that we can achieve more. So those are the things that resonate with me, if I recall correctly yesterday, in his speech. And of course, he stressed also the achievements that the bank had over the last 5 years. You will all agree with me that the traditional has done tremendously well. 18 million people since 2015 had access to electricity, 141 million people. Improve agricultural technology for food security, 15 million people with access to finance from private investment, and 101 million people with access to transport infrastructure, and 60 million people additionally had access to water and sanitation. This is what he promised that is going to be built upon. And also, of course, he also very strong on the issue of climate and the environment. A number of people argue that this is an issue for industrialized areas, but we disagree. Climate is causing huge havoc in Africa, also flooding, affects our agriculture, and so forth. So, those are the issues
Prof.
that emphasize.
Some of the issues, yes, interesting speech that he gave yesterday, but and I know that speaking about electricity, I mean, we're grappling with so much here. We just spoke about some concerns that consumers have about electricity a while ago. And I do know that there are some investments, some support coming from the AfDB to Nigeria, some states in Nigeria, so as to ensure that electricity, the quality, the standard improves. But at the same time, I mean, looking across Africa, we know that they have their challenges in terms of leadership, private sector participation. Yes, he said that he's going to do a lot, but what is he thinking to ensure that the private sector leads a lot of these investments that are going on, such that, the public sector are not overbearing, and as such defeat the purpose of the investments and the interventions by the AfDB?
No, thank you very much, Chris. One of the issues that came up very strongly yesterday also is the issue of partnership and policy dialogue. And you are very right. I mean, it's one thing for someone from outside of a national sovereign boundary to either provide advice or to provide financing. At the end of the day, African countries are sovereign entities. So they have to make decisions. They have to do things consistent with national plans. And this is where I believe all of Africa now agree that the business of running enterprise doesn't belong to government. I think we all have tried over the last 50 years, and we have seen that government just doesn't run business well. So getting private sector involved will be key. And as you see, actually, 40% of the bank's financing has really devolved into what we call NSO, non-sovereign operations, over the last 5 years. So the bank is giving more and more. In fact, if you look at the portfolio for Nigeria over the last 4 years, 56% or so went to the private sector. And this is going to be continuing. And that doesn't mean, of course, that you will not support government. But the point you are raising here is that government just doesn't run business well. And I think through policy dialogues, through knowledge support, through partnership, I believe the bank is in a position also to make this message very clear. Light up Africa and power Africa. In fact, it's actually light up and power Africa. It's a huge proportion of the bank's business. And we all realize that without energy, without electric power, we cannot compete in the manufacturing space. Our industry cannot function, and our society as a whole actually cannot function. So the emphasis on Power Africa and Light Up Africa is going to continue, and we are hoping that all of Africa, including our own dear country Nigeria, is waking up now to realize that we cannot continue to toy with the idea of electricity. And we all know, we feel the pain we all go through. I live in Abidjan, but I'm home all the time except for COVID now. We see it. Everybody has to put his own generator or inverter and all that. We are hoping that with the kind of support that will be coming and that have been coming, we will get over this over the next 5 years.
I mean, clearly politicians, they think differently in terms of how they do things from the private sector and some others who want to get things done. What are your experiences, the AfDB, in handling these kind of governments at the national and perhaps subnational levels who may be very sensitive, thinking, wait a minute, it's AfDB trying to perhaps steal our thunder here? How are you relating and dealing, trying to overcome such sensitive governments where necessary?
No, thank you, Chris. I was in the United Nations for 20 years before I moved to the bank, and you find the same response. In many cases when you deal with governments, not just in Nigeria, depending on the mode of engagement, the respect they have for that organization. Yes, sometimes governments are responsive. And when we say government, there are several levels. I find sometimes, for example, when the chief executive of a state will actually go along with you and give orders to, those are the lower level, to do something. And that's where you run into brick wall. Sometimes it's just an individual. So I think the nature of institutions that we need to build should be really look at it very closely. Also, I'm aware that institutions at the end of the day are run by people. So those who have power to run institutions and determine the cost and the performance of institutions are those that we need to actually pay attention to also. The people you put in authority, the people who have the power to make decisions, no matter what. We were discussing the other day with some colleagues, and we said, when you look at Nigeria, look at a couple of countries, indeed they have responded to global calls to build certain institutions, whether on environment, whether on climate, whether on whatever you have it. But how do you run it? What's the quality of that institution? And I think this is one of the emphasis that Dr. Adesina was making the other day, that we need to build quality institutions. In fact, one of his, he actually enumerated 5 things along that, which from the bank, also from building quality institutions, strong institutions, strengthening human capacity, enhancing their effectiveness, deepening quality and impact, maintaining financial sustainability in the context of the bank, but it also applies to the context of the countries. So I think at the end of the day, it has to do with those who are in authority at the level of institution. You can even have a head of state who means well. You can have a state governor who means well. But what's the quality of those you put in charge to implement these assignments on a daily basis? I think this is where my experience, we have run into all kinds of stonewalling, if you might call it that. I can give you stories upon stories, but you are very right. We are hoping that with a deepened policy dialogue, more engagement with countries rather than just financing alone, the bank will be in a position also to influence the course of development.
Right. So I'd like to touch on a major issue now. A lot of things you've talked about will be dependent on regional integration, working together, countries coming together and working together. Now, there's been a lot of, reports and, things we've seen between African countries. In fact, you hear some African countries would prefer to do business with countries outside of Africa than do with African countries. Now, AfCFTA is set to take off, in fact, has largely taken off to an extent. But for the AfDB, what kind of regional integration do you have to work with right now? How well are we integrating together as African nations? Because that's going to be vital to the growth of the continent.
I agree with you. Right now, the fact that we even got here is a big achievement for Africa. As you know, Africa is fragmented politically. Linguistic-wise, we are fragmented. The markets are small. The scale of doing business is so small. This is why it's hard for Africans to compete globally. For example, when you look at the agricultural space, for example, 70% of global trade today is in processed food, processed and semi-processed of produce. We are totally absent. Why? Because we just don't have a comparative advantage. And when we say comparative advantage, it means you simply don't have the scale. You don't have the scale even locally for domestic markets to supply the domestic market. So those who have the scale, they will produce cheaper and higher quality, and they are able to deliver with speed. So these are the sort of things that we need to, the deficits in African integration that we need to bridge. Our customs areas, you find the borders are so difficult to even to transact business through. Between two countries, you have 20 different posts, people asking for all kinds of things. So this is the sort of assignment that the bank has set for itself in the Integrate Africa mission. We need to remove all these barriers. We need to remove, Yeah,
it would seem then, pardon me for butting in, it would seem then that on the one hand is the AfDB trying to champion this. On the other hand, are the African countries and their leaderships, maybe not being in sync or on the same page. So if we're talking about Integrate Africa, which you have just talked about now, on the agenda that you have on your website is trade facilitation, depth of regional integration, free movement of people. We're having, divergent legislation in different countries about that. One nation in Africa is fighting the nationals of another nation in the same nation, and we're going to be talking about integrating Africa, perhaps, just as you said. That's an assignment that the AfDB has cut out for itself. But you also talked about the fact that we need to upscale the skill level in Africa. Now, I don't know how easy we can get that, seeing that Africa is heavily dependent on importation, and a significant number of African countries are heavily indebted. How do we bridge this gap and industrialize Africa, just as you have said?
Yes, and of course, COVID had changed everything. COVID-19 had made a bad situation even worse, and it's not just with us. How we recover and how quickly we recover again will also be very important. Some countries have lost a huge proportion of their GDP. So you are very right. We need to move faster in terms of rebuilding, recovery, and to building resilient economies in Africa. We have no choice. Now, I want to say that for all African heads of state to actually agree on the AfCFTA, it's itself a major step forward. Believe me, the big powers don't want you to integrate. Outsiders don't want you to be united, because it's in the interest of others for you to continually be the supplier of raw materials, to continually be fragmented as a region. And as you know, the adage says, divided, you stand, the easier the defeat for you. So I think the heads of states have agreed, but long institutional structures are always not easy to change. Long partnerships with colonial masters that have been there for 60, 70, 80 years are going to be changed only very slowly. So I think this is where we also need to be strategic and very systematic in terms of what we do to stay the course. You saw recently all that happened happen in this particular fight for petitioner. As I said somewhere, it's for the soul of Africa. It's not about him. So I believe that all the issues you raised are very correct. We need quality human capital. We need quality infrastructure. And we need to build this very quickly. It's not as if Africans are not educated. But sometimes when people talk about quality, you need to compare yourself with others. If you are going to be competing globally, you cannot use the same standard with which you are competing your village to the next village. So you have to raise your game. So I believe that COVID has caused a lot of rethinking for all of us. It has changed the landscape. But for me, I also see it as an opportunity that we need a reset. We need to recalibrate where we are coming from and where we are going, and be bolder in terms of what we need to do. Part of what was raised yesterday was that it's about quality. The issue is quality.
Prof, let me jump in on this, and just one more thing before we wrap up. Getting our leadership recruitment process, the elections will be a very important thing across Africa to ensure that we get our best to come up and run things. But speaking about quality manpower, he was very optimistic in his speech where he beckoned on young people, Africans in diaspora, to come back. So what was he expecting? Wait, they should look for the policies to materialize, have a strong footing before they come back, or start coming back? Because, several challenges still exist before many of them can come back.
No, yes, indeed. A leader will put out a vision. Then it's left to all of us now to implement it, to look for ways in which we make this happen. All countries have been beneficiaries of their diaspora. All countries, everywhere. And some of you hear that I hear your accent. Some of you initially somewhere else. So I think, yes, we have to keep pushing for engagement with that diaspora. We have to keep pushing for good people also within the countries who want to do what is right for their country. Skill sets evolve. You learn in a different environment, and you can bring that kind of learning to our own region. So I think it was very clear also about the fact that within our African countries we have a lot of assets, but we need to raise the quality. I think the key is about a very deliberate, systematic effort. Things just don't happen. You have to target certain sectors. When you look at economic history, all countries evolve through what we call a leading sector. And at this moment, for example, now we are talking of modernizing agriculture, industrializing agriculture, raising the manufacturing capacity, starting with agriculture. In fact, I will be bold to tell you that the reason where we're today is because agriculture failed. That is the inception point for many countries. If agriculture had succeeded, like the Green Revolution in India in 1960, middle of 60s, the moment you succeed with agriculture, you cut off your import bill, you're able to feed yourself. And then the surplus labor into manufacturing. So this is really, yeah.
I think that'll be a fantastic point to leave it. We're hoping that agric will be the next oil. Always very interesting talking about African development, and we do thank you very much for talking to us today on the program.
Thank you, Chris and colleagues.
All right, so now the president of AfDB can dance as much. So those clips you saw of him dancing earlier, very much welcome now.